To somehow use the limited amount of time you get in NS to learn an entirely new language seems exhausting, but by the end of this video, I'll change your mind. I'll even tell you the one trick I use to make friends with and converse with native Spanish speakers for free. I would say that there's 3 main practices that you should consider incorporating into your learning, because I've been doing Duolingo for maybe over a year now, and the language didn't really start connecting in my head until I started incorporating these 3 other tactics. So the first one is shows. In the beginning, I started watching these YouTube clips from the show Friends, but they were in Spanish dubbed with English subtitles. And the guy who created them even paused the video every now and then to teach us key vocabulary, which was really helpful for me starting out, to understand how the language is spoken in everyday conversations, not just formal writing. So it would help you pick up basic vocabulary. Once you get more advanced, you could watch actual Spanish shows on Netflix just with English subtitles and refer to them, or you could try watching your normal English shows but with Spanish subtitles. But the one benefit of watching actual Spanish shows is that you get to actually immerse yourself in Spanish culture, which would make your language more natural, like if you were an actual native speaker. One key thing to remember here is that I watch these episodes multiple times, because I remember reading somewhere that you need to use a word 12 different times before it becomes an actual part of your vocabulary. I kept watching these videos on loop until I could tell you what happens without even reading the subtitles. Try to watch each one a few times at least. There was this one guy who watched the Spider-Verse movie in Spanish so many times that he could tell what was going on without even reading the subtitles. It helps if it's a show or a movie that you actually like. And also if you like the show, you're more likely to remember what happens and associate the Spanish words being said with the event and remember it. The second practice is listening to podcasts. There are a certain few ones that I would highly recommend, especially if you're a beginner. Then I would say you should listen to the Immersive Spanish podcast. A bit more intermediate, then I would say the Spanish Obsessed podcast. And another one which is actually quite interesting is the Simple Stories in Spanish podcast. And it's quite fun that while the narrator is telling us these stories, you can actually catch a few words here and there that will really give you more motivation to continue, because you'll actually understand the story being said without needing to translate it, which is quite rewarding after all your efforts. This goes for any language that you might want to learn. You might ask me, when's the time to listen to a whole podcast in NS, right? Some of these have like 10-minute or 20-minute episodes, which you could listen to once a day. Or if it's a longer episode, you could split it into different parts and come back once you're ready or once you have the time to. Or if you have some chores to do in your bunk, like maybe rolling up your smartphone, you could listen to one of these episodes while folding for maximum efficiency. I've actually done that before. For all of these so far, I usually have a Google Translate open. Or recently, I've actually been using ChatGPT a lot for certain specific phrases that I can't really find in Google search. I type it out in Spanish and it replies me in Spanish. One cool thing I did this week was I told ChatGPT to act as my Spanish teacher and grade my writing. It replied completely in Spanish and gave me a 75%. So there's your free Spanish teacher who's available 24/7. And thirdly, probably the most boring practice of all, using an actual book. So I've been using this grammar Spanish book for a while and it's actually really helpful. It's more focused on grammar than concepts or vocabulary, but it's an incredible foundation to start your learning on. I didn't even buy this book, I got it from the library. But if you want, then a link to this book is in the description. Spanish verb tenses. There are a lot of practices that you can do. It almost annoys me, but it is very effective. And I found that since I use the same word so many times in these practices, that it's very easy for me to remember them. But lastly, about the trick that I use to speak and make friends with native Spanish speakers, I'm sure most of you have heard of it. It's actually the game VRchat. A lot of people probably have this belief that VRchat is a game for degenerates, and rightfully so, but one day I joined this world by chance. It was called Spanish Club, and I found out that it's a world dedicated for Spanish speakers to come together and talk and make friends. So obviously, without any hesitation whatsoever, I walked up to the first person I saw and said, ¿Cómo estás? Okay, but if you're actually shy, you could do what I do and straight up just insert yourself into the conversation and listen to what's being said and give your own comments here and there. You don't always have to actually go up to someone. I learned that this random person I met had sleep apnea and she was 25 and lived in Peru, and I winged it with Google Translate from there. It's really like you're hanging out with a bunch of friends who all happen to speak Spanish. Of course, there's tons of other worlds dedicated to different languages. There's the very popular one for Japan that a lot of people go to and speak Japanese at. Some are even offering to teach you the language for free or a small cost. Also, it's generally fun to be around like-minded people and see what everyone's talking about. There's so many anecdotal experiences of people who move to a different country and don't know the local language. But since they're forced to communicate with the locals, they pick up the language much faster compared to someone who's just learning it as a hobby, because they actually have a need to learn to speak. So it's something like that. You're forced to speak, you're forced to use all the theory that you've learned from the 3 other practices that I've mentioned and apply it into actual conversations with native Spanish speakers. While I did sort of write off Duolingo as not that helpful, I still do the 1 lesson every day to keep my streak. You can use it as a sign of your progress, like how many days you've been practicing. It also reminds you, because I have the home widget that reminds me that I haven't done the lesson for the day, and the Duo bird looks quite angrily at me if I haven't done it. Some bonus tips would be to listen to actual Spanish music. I really like reggaeton and the slower R&B tracks as well. You could listen to the songs that you like and read along the lyrics and find out the meanings as well. Language learning really is a time commitment, and if you have trouble applying the daily practices that I talked about, here's my video on how you could save a few hours a day and media consumption in general and how it affects your time.